For business, we say hello to Kate Moody.
Hi, Francois.
We're waiting for that next wave of sanctions from the EU to drop. They could include an oil embargo. More broadly, big conversation going on over the EU pooling its energy policy.
Yeah, and that's been going on for a couple of months, really. Even before Russia invaded Ukraine, there has been some division about whether the EU should tighten ties on these issues. Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi is one of the leading voices calling for closer European integration and new mechanisms to allow for a joint response to issues like soaring energy prices. The Italian leader has asked other EU member countries to cap the price of natural gas imported from Russia to protect households and businesses, and urged more clarity in whether ceding to Moscow's demands for payments in rubles would indeed flout sanctions. Speaking to European lawmakers ahead of a key summit on Wednesday, Draghi said the crisis is an opportunity for the EU to rethink its energy strategy.
The problem of high energy prices is systemic and must be solved with structural solutions that break the link between the price of gas and that of electricity. The problem of the cost of energy will be at the centre of the next European Council. We need strong and immediate decisions for the benefit of all European citizens.
Well, on Monday, Draghi announced a €14 billion aid package for low-income Italians and businesses. That will include one-off cash payments, energy subsidies, and tax breaks for smaller firms. Now, to fund at least some of that aid, he's increasing a so-called windfall tax on energy companies that are profiting from those soaring prices. Oil, gas, and even solar energy companies that report increased profits from October to March will face a new 25% tax. That's higher than the 10% that was proposed back in March. Estimates suggest the one-off tax could bring in some €10 billion in revenue this year alone. Well, last week, the UK finance minister opened the door for the very first time to a similar windfall tax if companies there aren't investing in energy security. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, though, says it's not currently on the cards. Calls for such a measure intensified on Tuesday as oil giant BP reported its highest operational profit in over a decade, thanks to surging oil and gas prices. The British energy giant brought in $6.2 billion in the first 3 months of this year, although it wound up with a $20 billion quarterly loss because of its decision to abandon a 20% stake in Russian oil giant Rosneft. Opposition lawmakers in the UK said those results underscored the good sense of a windfall tax and for giants like BP and Shell to help offset higher household bills. Let's check in on the day's trading action now. The major European indices closed higher. BP shares rising nearly 6% in London on those bumper profits. The FTSE 100 still lagging behind the CAC 40 and DAX, which gained about 0.75 of a percentage point each there. A choppy session on Wall Street has seen the Nasdaq crossing back and forth over the flat line there. April was the worst month for the tech-heavy Nasdaq since 2008. Investors are already tuning into the U.S. Federal Reserve as it kicks off a 2-day policy meeting. It's expected to raise interest rates by 0.5 percentage point on Wednesday to deal with soaring inflation. India is still sweltering under a heat wave. Temperatures of over 40 degrees Celsius, more than 105 Fahrenheit, pushed electricity demand to a record high in April. It's also led to increasingly frequent power cuts and led the government to at least temporarily reverse a commitment to reduce its dependence on coal. Karen Lambolet reports.
The unprecedented heat wave in India has been taking a toll, sending demand for electricity through the roof and threatening to disrupt essential services. Businesses have also been hard hit, with frequent, sometimes scheduled power cuts interrupting workflow.
When there are power cuts, work stops and we just sit around. We still have to pay the workers. We used to make more money.
Before, there was one power cut every week, and it would only last 1 hour. Now it's regular, and it's at least an hour each time. How can there be any business? Who will come and sit here in the heat? People don't leave their homes anyway because of the heat.
The heat wave has shown a spotlight on just how reliant India is on coal, which produces 70% of the country's electricity. Last week, more than 700 passenger train journeys were canceled to allow more freight trains to move coal from mines to power plants. Supplies at more than half of India's coal plants are critically low. Experts say this resulted at least in part from poor forecasting.
I think we didn't have enough resources in place to do proper forecasting, so it should not have come as a surprise.
While the immediate crisis could break once the heat subsides, difficulties will be compounded with the start of the monsoon season next month, when heavy rains could further interfere with mining and supplies. Demand for electricity in India, Asia's third largest economy, is expected to increase more than anywhere else in the world over the next 20 years.
That's all for now, Francois.
And he thanks Kate Moody, who will be back with the closing word on Wall Street later on. It's time now for sports. We say